guys, DarkLord Project here again, and today we have a $750 extreme gaming PC build. Now before we get started, I have two things to mention. Now the first one is I do have a new thumbnail style. I really like it. It turned out really good. I got inspired by Scattervolt that did my own twist to it, and he approves that I, decide to use his original design and switch it up because it is a very nice design. Now the second thing is that I think I'm going to buy the mic pretty soon. I'm not 100% sure because there's no definite date, but this audio is perfectly fine for now. But in the future, I will be investing in a mic. Now the CPU for this build is the Core i5-4670, which is $209. It's clocked at 3.4 GHz, it's LJ1150, and it's quad core. Now the Core i5 is great for this build. The first reason is that it's quad core and it's clocked at 3.4 GHz. There's not a lot to say about that except that it just is amazing for gaming. The i5 is kind of a sweet spot when it comes to CPUs, not as expensive as an i7, but not as slow as an i3. So the i5 made a perfect fit for this lower budget build. The motherboard for this build is the Gigabyte GA-B85M HD3, which is $65. It's micro ATX LJ1150 and has a B85M business class chipset. Now I was looking into this chipset because you don't usually hear a lot about the B85. Now when I was looking it up, it's classified as a business class one, but when I was comparing it to the consumer one, it's very similar. So you might be a little skeptical about picking this chipset, but from my research it should be perfectly fine for this build. Now I really do like this board. It is a micro ATX build. It's pretty standard. It is a little bit higher quality because it is $65 compared to a $40 motherboard that I usually would use in a lower end build. This one really does stand out to them. It doesn't support very high speed RAM, but that is an issue because we're not using an APU. Now another great thing about this board is that it is a Gigabyte board. Gigabyte does make some really high quality boards. Next to Asus and MSI, I really do like their boards, those three companies. So it's nice to know that you're buying a board from a pretty high quality company. So the RAM for this build is the G.Skill Ripjaws X series, which is $70. It's 8 GB, two 4 GB sticks. It's DDR3 clocked at 1600 MHz, and it has best price to performance. Now I really do like this RAM. I think I used this in the past 2 or 3 builds. As you can see, I really do like this RAM. It's great RAM because first, it has only a $70 price tag, and second, it's pretty much everything you need for RAM nowadays. 8 GB DDR3 1600 MHz are the 3 things you look for when it comes to RAM, and once you have those, you're pretty much set. While it only is $70 compared to its competitors, which are around $80, you are saving yourself about $10, which actually does help in the long run. Another really nice thing about this RAM is that it is kind of lower profile RAM. It's not as tall as most RAM sticks are, but this one is pretty short compared to most RAM sticks around its price range, which is nice to know. Because if you do decide to upgrade and get a bigger, bulkier cooler, it shouldn't interfere with the RAM. The storage for this build is the Kingston SSD Now SV300, which is $50. It has 128 GB. It's a 2.5-inch SSD, and it has the SandForce controller. Now when I saw this SSD, it did have a great price. Now there are some downfalls to this great price for an SSD. The first one being that it is only 128 GB. Now that might seem like a lot, but it really isn't. Once you install your OS and about a few games, maybe up to 10 games for sure, you're pretty much out of space. There's not a lot of space on this storage, so that's kind of a number one con for this. The second con is that it does have a SandForce controller. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of the SandForce controller. It has trouble booting at a pretty decent speed, but once the SSD is up and running, it's perfectly fine. It competes pretty well with other SSDs. Except for the boot speed and the low storage, this does make a great SSD. It has a price of $50, which is the same price as most 1TB HDDs, which is pretty awesome. Most SSDs are around $100, and it's kind of crazy that they became this low price recently. Another great thing is that it is smaller than the HDD. Now, it's not like we have a small case in this build, but if you do, the smaller size does help, but it does help with cable management because it is smaller in general. It'll fit more places in your case if you do run out of room, if you decide to upgrade. So their smaller size is a small advantage. The storage for this build is the Seagate Barracuda, which is $49. It has 1 terabyte of storage, it's a 3.5 HDD, and it's 7,200 RPM. Now I really do like this hard drive. As you can see, I've used it maybe in the past few builds. I can't really remember because I use it so often. It's just such a great HDD because it's everything you could possibly need in an HDD. It's 1 terabyte and 7,200 RPM, which is pretty awesome, and it is only $49, which is pretty much a steal when it comes to HDDs. Now most hard drives are pretty inexpensive, but it's nice to know that you can get that much storage for under $50. The graphics card for this build is the EVGA GeForce GTX 960, which is $210. It's clocked at 1.28 GHz. It has 2 GB of GDDR5 RAM, and it's a Maxwell architecture. Now this is very new when it comes to the GPU market. It came out a few weeks ago and it's pretty awesome when it comes to budget builds. Now I could have easily put a 970 in this build, but I'd rather put a 960, which is pretty close to performance. Obviously not as fast as 970, but still pretty decent performance. And I'd rather get some other high quality parts, like I was able to get a good PSU in, CPU, and other parts. So it's nice to know that I could still get a high performance graphics card while still getting other high quality parts. Now the great thing about this is that it does have the Maxwell architecture. This allows me to get only a 500 watt power supply and able to power this very powerful card. Another great thing is that it is clocked at 1.28 GHz, which is pretty fast when it comes to GPUs. But it only does have 2 GB of GDDR5 RAM. That's kind of the downside to the 960. I think there is a model of 3 GB, but this one was pretty inexpensive, and I think it still fits the job perfectly fine. So it's nice to know that you're still getting a pretty decently priced graphics card that can handle most games at very high settings at 1080p. The case for this build is the Corsair 200R, which is $50. It's a mid-tower ATX case. It supports a wide variety of parts and has a simplistic design. Now the reason I decided to pick this one is because of compatibility and it's really nice high quality case. Now this is a quality case by Corsair. Compared to the other cases, because you don't have a lot of lower end cases, this is not up to par in Corsair standards, but for this build it should be perfectly fine. It still is a very high quality case. It's made out of very nice materials that you would want in a PC case, so that's perfectly fine. Now the second thing I like about this case is that it has a very simplistic design. It's very box shaped with not much to see. It doesn't have a side window or anything, so it's very simplistic, which can be nice at times. Another great thing is that it does support a wide variety of parts. Because it is such a big case and it does have a lot of room in the inside, it supports big graphics card, big coolers, anything pretty big it can easily fit inside this case. It supports a wide variety of motherboards, including the one we picked out, so it's nice to know that shouldn't be any compatibility issues the day you build this or the day you decide to upgrade this build. The power supply for this build is the Seasonic 520 watt, which is $68. It's a very high quality power supply. It's 520 watts and it's 80 plus per ounce certified. Now, because there was some extra money at the end of the build, I decided to fit a Seasonic power supply instead of a Corsair or an EVGA power supply. Now, Seasonic does have some of the top quality power supplies on the market. If you could pick any company to be the top quality company, I would definitely pick Seasonic. They have a great warranty and power supply. Now, warranty is key to power supplies because power supplies can tend to fail and break down other parts when they do fail. So it's nice to know if this part fails and other parts fail with it, Seasonic will actually sometimes replace the power supply and the parts with it. Now, another great thing is that this is a very high quality power supply, so it won't break at all. There hasn't been a lot of people saying, oh, my Seasonic power supply broke. So it's nice to know that this power supply will last you a very long time. So that's pretty much it, guys. Make sure to check out purepc.net, Twitter, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you later.